George, I just wanted to chat about the women's team, and what on earth is going on there, because we've talked at length about the men's team and their season being over by the end of January, and it's a similar story really for the women's team. We're not going up, we're not going to go down, and seems to be a bit of transfer business that's been going on too.
Yeah, I mean, 8th out of 12 teams, nowhere near bad enough to get relegated, but nowhere near good enough to get the one promotion spot. 8 points adrift to that with a couple of games to go, but they're not going to be able to turn it around because there's too many teams who've got more points than them that and are closer to it. And as you mentioned, the transfer business, they've signed a load of WSL teenagers on loan this month. They've lost Freya Gregory, who was really good. She was recalled by Aston Villa to then be sold to Sunday's opponents, Newcastle, for a considerable amount of money. They've been unlucky with injuries, to be fair to them. They signed a couple of players who are now out. But I think if you're down to injuries and then you're bringing in teenagers, then your season's gone quite poorly in terms of recruitment. And they just seem like after last season, where they pushed on from their first season in the championship, they got more points, finished higher in the table, then lost Marianne Spacey-Cale. She stepped away and become director of women's football. Remy Allen's come in and they've looked all right in some games, but then there's other games where they just never look like causing any problems for teams. And you look at someone like Durham, who beat them today, not tied to a men's club at all, but they're up there and they could get promoted into the Women's Super League. And you've got to look at sort of how they've done what they've done and look at what Saints have done. And they've just not, I don't think they've recruited well enough. They've lost players. They've lost Kayla Rendell and Ella Morris, 2 players who've been a part of the rise. They were always going to go to the Women's Super League. And there's more players in that squad who are young. And I think they'll go to the Women's Super League in the summer if clubs are after them. And they're going to possibly be an even worse position with the squad. And that's a difficult position to be in. I think Portsmouth are guaranteed to go down this season. They don't think they've even won a game yet still. And so something to say from that perspective, but you're almost just looking for that game against Pompey at St. Mary's is the only thing left to get excited about.
Yeah, we were expecting them to kick on a bit this year, Glenn, and it's just not really happened, has it?
I think we were until you look beneath the surface. As George has highlighted, there was players that have been part of the rise. Rosie Parnell retired. You had her sort of natural replacement, Laura Rafferty, was allowed to leave. Katie Wilkinson, who's the all-time championship top scorer, she left as well. Lexi Lloyd-Smith, who was one of the better younger players, she left.
Is now the division's top scorer at Bristol City.
Yeah, it took 3 months to get a new manager in when Marianne Spacey-Cale went upstairs. And it was a very inexperienced Remy Allen, and she was talking a good game about getting promoted when she first came in. But it's almost like it's, if you want to be taken seriously, then do serious things. They've gone into the season really with one striker who has an injury record, a bit like Ross Stewart. Rihanna Dean is always injured. So they've been playing sort of midfielders up front, which is explained. If you take away the game against Pompey, who are so far worse than everybody else, everyone's scoring 5 and 6 against them. So Saints put 5 past them. If you take away that game, we've scored 10 goals in 11 games, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. So yeah. And this transfer window, 5 players all on loans. And if you watch their interviews, I know they're very young and they say what they're they say what's on their mind when kids are that age, sort of thing, and they're all saying, I'm looking forward to getting minutes in senior women's football. It's not about let's try and get Saints up the league and see where we are next season. So we've become a finishing school for WSL teenagers, and it just, what are we doing? What are we doing as a club? Are we looking to kick on? Would we, you get players on loan, they're going to play at the expense of the players that you've got who are possibly going to be here next season. So are we running the team for Arsenal now? Are we running the team for Chelsea, Aston Villa, wherever it is we're getting these players from? Or I think there needs to be some sort of statement, really. I mean, we've actually got a director of football, if you like, on the women's side. So maybe there needs to be some sort of statement about what the team is about.
What the ambition is.
Yeah, do serious things. Don't loan players to Portsmouth. If you want to do serious, if you want to be serious and want to be part of Southampton Football Club, then don't loan players to Portsmouth, because you're basically helping them out. I know it's very different in women's football to men's football with regards to the rivalries and stuff like that. But that's the sort of thing that people just look at it and go, what? And the club were embarrassed as well because they didn't put out that she'd gone to Portsmouth in the tweet. Emma Thompson was her name. So, it's just unserious things going on. And if you want to be taken seriously, you've got to do better than that.
Is it going to be another reset in the summer, Steve? Can you see that?
Possibly. I mean, we don't know what the situation is in terms of funding. I mean, obviously across the board, across the entirety of the club, men's and women's, going down, you're gonna see a cut in revenue. I don't know whether. I mean, I imagine that it's possible that money that you put in for the women's side of the game is completely offset on the PSR regulation. So it might be that they can continue to fund it at the same level if they want to. I mean, given that seemingly last season there didn't seem to be any issues. So yeah, I mean, perhaps it'll carry on sort of in terms of the budgetary level. But yeah, something's got to be kind of looked at in terms of just how they kind of establish some sort of stability, because as Glenn said, I mean, you normally when you bring a player in on loan, it's as an impact player. And Freya Gregory was exactly that. She was a player that ordinarily we wouldn't have been able to sign because she's at a club like Aston Villa where she's earning a lot more than I would imagine than all of our players. And we're not sort of having the silly sort of budgets that the likes of Newcastle and London City Lionesses are throwing around. So yeah, loan players in that sense are ones that are going to be subsidised by the parent club, and they're expected to make an impact, and she did. But I don't see how it's going to be possible for these five youngsters to all impact on the first team sort of together. I mean, you might have one that breaks out and shows something and just sort of sticks their hand up and says, "Yep, I'm here, and I'm gonna be the one that's gonna kind of stand out from this group." But you're not giving them the conditions to succeed in there, really, especially given if you look at the results, I think it's 5 without a win, and the 2 draws that we conceded very late equalisers. So yeah, we're not lasting in games either, and it's very, very difficult to see how you kind of motivate the side for the remainder of the season. That Pompey game suddenly becomes a huge banana skin. Because this is the thing though, because if you're in a situation where you know that you're kind of just bumbling along to the end of the season, there's nothing to play for, as George said, you're not going to get relegated, you're not going to go up, and Pompey haven't won a game all season. They've got 2 points from 12 games, I think, and they come to St Mary's. This is their big opportunity. Whereas we're still kind of in that mindset of going through the motions, and maybe we're rotating players in and out and trying to find something that kind of works ahead of like making decisions on contracts in the summer. And actually, there's not a huge amount of motivation there, because, as you say, the rivalry between Saints and Pompey in the women's game isn't anywhere near as fierce as the men's one, for obvious reasons. I mean, it's just a shorter-lived rivalry. I mean, it's not been a rivalry for so many years. So yeah, that game all of a sudden becomes a huge potential PR own goal for the club, because I think is it on BBC Red Button? I think.
Oh Lord!
Sure.
I think because it's on the Saturday evening, isn't it? It's been moved for some sort of coverage, whether it's only YouTube or like FA Player or something like that. But it's definitely been moved for some sort of special coverage. So yeah, the club will be wanting to get a big crowd in, but they did that last week, and they get turned over comfortably by Sunderland. And yeah, you end up with players and manager coming out and apologising. I mean, I think that's probably a little bit over the top, personally, for a fairly regulation 2-0 home defeat. But when you're trying to get people in the gates for these games, you've got to be showing people something that they can kind of cling to, if you like.
Yeah, you want them coming back, don't you? That's the thing. it's not just about how much money they spend in the fan zone. You want them coming back week in, week out, really. So, right, we shall see.